Well, hey everyone! Welcome to episode 355 of F-Stop, Collaborate, and Listen with your host, Matt Payne. This week on the podcast, I am stoked to bring you the very first street and documentary photographer to this podcast, Kamal X. I am a strong believer that cross-pollination across different genres of photography makes us better photographers. So I think that this episode will be quite valuable to all of our listeners. Kamal set out in 2020 to tell the story of the George Floyd protests surrounding the Black Lives Matter movement, and what he found as a street photographer surprised him. This week we learn about Kamal's journey as a photographer and how he manages to make compelling street photographs. Before we dive in, I wanted to thank our latest supporters on Patreon, including Matt Newman and Stephen DeRoche. This podcast is completely listener supported, so if you would like to keep it going, please hit pause and go to patreon.com/fstop and listen, or find a link in the show notes. I would be forever grateful to you. Okay, let's get to this week's episode with Kamal X. All right, Kamal, it is awesome to have you on the podcast.
Yeah, so excited. It's been a good wait and a great wait, because this is something that I marked on that calendar like, okay, December is going down. So to be here right now and finally be able to connect in a real way, I'm just so thankful and excited to be here and share some vibes. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. It's funny, when you had first connected with me, I looked at your work on your website and I was like, wow, there's some really awesome images here. So I'm excited to see where we take this. I think you're the very first pure street photographer we've had on the show. So I'm kind of out of my element, so it'll be really fun.
Well, you know, I'm happy and excited about that too. I got to represent for all my peoples out there, street photography, documentary style photography, even though we all are in this together, but there definitely is differences in the disciplines. It's funny, I just left a friend's engagement party and they're asking me to take photos. I'm like, I'm not that kind of photographer. Like, it's not, they don't understand the differences of the different languages we speak. So yeah, I'm really happy to be the first of, maybe more, let's see how I go, how this goes. Let's see how it goes from there.
Yeah, right on. Well, Kamal, for people who aren't familiar with you and your photography, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Awesome. And again, thank you for having me. Hello, everyone. My name is Kamal X. I am a documentary street photographer based out of Brooklyn now, like literally just moved into my new place last week, geez. And I'm super excited because it took 8 months to find an apartment back in Brooklyn. The market is crazy. The rent is sky high. I was coming from Texas, which is a much more affordable situation. So there was a lot going on. So this has been a long journey. So, I've been here for about a week and this is my first serious thing that's happening here. So I'm really excited. So yeah, I'm from New Jersey, but now I live in Brooklyn. Brooklyn has kind of been my home for a very long time. I've lived in other places and explored a bit, but Brooklyn, New York in particular, is really my favorite place to be. I've been shooting photography for about, I think it's been 8 years now. Ooh, eight years. It kind of creeps up on you. I'm currently single as a dollar bill, as you said, as you heard. I just moved to Brooklyn, so there's some reason behind the leave from Texas, and I'm just all into the you try things out, they don't work out. All love is love, but just you got to keep pushing, you got to keep figuring it out. And I also have, it's funny that it all happened because like my book, as you know, Black Astronaut, which came out October 24th. It's been a great vibe, just like experiencing my first major book to be released and connecting with so many people reaching out to me. It seems to be doing really good. People seem to really be connecting with the work, which is like, as you know, that's the number one thing as artists we want, is just to know that what we're saying is getting translated and it's being understood. So that's exciting too. So it's just been I'm in a good space. I'm in a good space. Yeah. I'm excited. I'm looking forward. I'm in a new home. I'm meeting you for the first time and you're amazing, and we're just going to vibe out, man. Photography is the vibe. It's my medium. I love it. As I said, 8 years, and I'm pretty much just really into making moments that move me. I would say if I had to like describe the kind of photographer, documentary style photographer I am, I don't really shoot much that doesn't excite me anymore, because I find that when I find scenarios or environments or experiences that really move me, I find that I show up in a different way versus if I'm just doing it just to do it. It's kind of like, it's good to like, you know, you work on your reflexes, get your game together, practice, so to speak. But I find when, you know, when I'm somewhere where I'm really excited and my, you know, my curiosity is vibing out and I'm just ready to go, that's kind of where I feel most alive. And that's the kind of experiences I try to go towards. Yeah.
I love that. Well, there's a lot of parallels there with most of the nature photographers I know. It's just a totally different experience. So,
yeah, for sure.
What inspired you to take up photography as a medium?
I think growing up, so I'm from Newark, New Jersey. I didn't say Newark, so I'm from Newark, New Jersey. So growing up, you know, my parents were amazing. They did their best to like, you know, make sure I was, you know, learning, becoming a good, outstanding human being, you know, but we didn't have the opportunity to travel as much as I would have hoped, as much as any family would hope, you know. And sure. I think for me and my stepdad, he used to take me to the movies all the time. That was our thing. And I would love to go to see these movies. Like I remember seeing Matrix, like in the movies, for example, you know, so like, yeah. You know, these movies kind of showed me that, yo, there's another world. There's people that don't look like me. There's places I've never seen before. And it just kind of excited my curiosity and imagination at a young age. So I think pictures has always meant something to me in terms of just like escaping your reality and seeing things that are interesting anyway. So I think that's always stayed true. Like I'm a movie buff. Before I started getting into photography, I was watching movies after movies. I've seen everything. So it's just in me, and it just makes sense that I picked up the camera. And thankfully I did, because this is all a surprise. None of this was like planned. I didn't know I was going to become a photographer. I didn't know I was going to have a photography book out. You know, this is such a riding the wave, but also accepting, you know, what your gut is telling you to try something different. And it's just a good feeling, because I know to see where I'm at today, to even be speaking with you right now, it's like, wow, imagine if I never just picked that camera up. Like, where would I be? So yeah. I think it's the curiosity aspect, childhood, movies, the importance of storytelling and making an impact, and you know, exploring your imagination. Yeah.
I love that. What I find in speaking with all these awesome photographers is that one of the most common threads is that kind of how we grew up and our upbringing and the experiences that we have as human beings starts to have a heavy influence on the types of photographs that we're drawn to and the types of images that we are drawn to start creating. And so I'm curious, what is it about your journey as a photographer, as a human being, your upbringing, your childhood? How has that impacted your photography journey?
Great question. And as I'm, you know, thinking about, you know, my history of photography, it's a lot of levels. Like, we're all very layered human beings, right? And if I'm going to be honest, you know, like I said, I'm from Newark, New Jersey. I think my parents tried their best, but it wasn't, you know, there were challenges. There were a lot of issues that, you know, I think in a perfect world they wouldn't have existed, but things happen, you know. Sure. And I think with the challenges of being a young kid, you know, I felt a lot of a sense of like, I didn't know where I belonged. Like, you know, why me? Like, why are these things happening? Like, I felt loved, but I also felt very confused at the same time. Like, I remember like in school never made sense to me, for example. Like, it never fit. It was always this job from the beginning. I didn't like it. I did what I had to do, you know, just to not get in trouble, but I really didn't like it. And, you know, it made me start to question myself, as if like something's wrong with me. Like, why don't I connect with like the other kids do? Why is it so much harder for me to get good grades versus the other kids? It seemed like they just coasting, you know? And I think for me, like, I had to find a way to make sense of it. I had to find something to kind of keep me balanced. And I had to find kind of my own world, so to speak. So my imagination and curiosity kind of like really were the thing that kept me at peace, because when I was in controlled environments, it didn't make sense to me. It was very like, why are we doing this? I was very rebellious also. So it was just like, I'm like, what is the point? I would just ask, what's the point? Like, where are we going? And I would look at, and there's no judgment. This is a kid's perspective. I'm like, why do I need to listen to you? Like, what are you doing? And where are you at today that's letting me know I need to follow what you're saying because I'm going to be like you one day. That's how I was thinking back then. And, it is what it is. I think it's a gift and a curse, sort of, a little bit, where like, I think that rebellious nature is a part of why I think I love art, and it's like the perfect place for that nature. But It also can be like very detrimental if you don't know how to balance that when you're growing up. So I think my journey of finding myself it like kind of collided in a beautiful way, and like art was the road. Like it was like, okay, you're not fitting in. You're not going to become a doctor or a lawyer. Cool. So what else are you going to do? I've done real estate. I was a real estate agent for like years. I won awards. I was like making money and all that stuff, and that didn't fit right. It was like, this doesn't feel right. I don't feel a sense of me. I feel like I'm just doing the same thing I was doing in school, just doing it to get accepted. So I think just ultimately just realizing I needed to accept myself. And fortunately, as I accepted myself, the camera was there and it all came together. And as I started to take pictures, ironically, it was like, as I was developing my voice as a person, not an artist, but as a person, I also was taking pictures along that ride. So there's like this really intimate connection with me in telling stories, whether it be from me sharing my growing up situation with movies and stuff with my dad, to dealing with the turbulence of childhood at the same time, and then becoming a young adult and like, okay, we got to do something, and 8 years later, this is where we're at. Yeah.
So it sounds like the camera and photography for you has been somewhat of a lens for some introspection to help you kind of understand who you are as a person, but also to help you process things that happened in your life that before photography didn't always make sense, but now you're starting to piece things together, and through the photography you're starting to be able to tell some of those stories. Yeah,
telling stories, because a lot of times, man, like, you can have some feelings in you that words just aren't enough. Emotions are very deep, man. You go through certain things and you can try to write it down. That helps though. But like, you can explain it, but like sometimes your words just don't have enough. So I think the arts for me was just like a place where like I didn't have to explain it. I can just do it. You had to work hard, but like I enjoyed that process of working hard, because I felt like, okay, as I worked hard, I'm seeing the results. And not even based on, people are liking my photos, but more so, I'm enjoying this. This is finally something that makes sense to me. There's no like, I got to prove something. And that's honestly one of the things I love about photography is if you put a photo on a wall and the artist isn't there, it has nothing to do with the artist. It just depends. And the photo is good. The photo is good. There's no like, some people care about the politics and all that stuff, but in general, like if it's good, it's good. And to me, that just levels the playing field so much that it was very attractive to me that like, wow, I don't have to sit there and do a speech. I don't have to give you my resume. It's good. If I can get there.
People don't care what you look like.
Yeah. It doesn't even, it's just, do you make people feel something? And if you're taking pictures of something that you have a connection with, some vulnerability with, or understanding and empathy with, I think it lays a great opportunity to create something that's really going to move people and move you, more importantly, because it's like you're the one doing it. You should enjoy it too. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm curious, was there a specific moment or an event that occurred where you had some kind of an epiphany that made you come to these conclusions about photography clicking for you, or was it more of a gradual process?
It was a few events that went down. One of them, I have to champion my best friend. So my best friend passed away from cancer about 10 years ago. And I wear this 7 hat actually, because our birthdays, we share my birthday is March 5th. His birthday was March 7th. So we used to always do birthdays together and stuff like that. So I found these hats that have these 7s on them. So like, it's kind of a way of always keeping them with me. And when he passed away 10 years ago, that was in the crux of me finding myself too. It was all co-created with the grief and the, dealing with creating a new, not even creating a new identity, just realizing I don't want the one I got. Like, I can't do this. This isn't sustainable. Mm-hmm. And this is before me picking up a camera. And him transitioning and being my best friend and being a creative at that age where he was a designer, fashion designer. And to this day, like, people were still buying his stuff. He really he did a lot. It isn't even about what he could have done. Like, he did a lot in fashion in his time here. So him being like my beacon, and wanting to connect with his energy, I miss my friend. So what can I do to commemorate or to stay connected? And I was like, I think that's some of the reason why I picked up the camera too, because it was like an artistic way. He's an artist. This is something that actually makes sense to me. I'm not going to make clothes. It's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. So, but the picking up a camera is like more in my lane, and at that time he was claustrophobic, which is hilarious. He was the funniest person I ever met. And so you just imagine a guy that's claustrophobic. Imagine going to clubs in the city and stuff, and you got to take the stairs up 40 flights to get to the rooftop club. It was so funny. But so for him, getting on a plane was an issue. For him, tight spaces and elevators were an issue. So I was always a freedom person traveling. Like, I would go to California. I lived in LA, for example. I lived in Atlanta. I lived in Texas. I lived in Oakland. I lived somewhere else, but like Baltimore, there we go. I lived in Baltimore. So he always looked at me like, man, this is amazing. Like, I can't believe you do that, bro. Like, I would never, how you get on flights like that? And mind, we're like in our 20s. So, this
right.
is all a brand new world. And so when he transitioned, it was like, for me, what can I do also that would commemorate our vibe? And it was like, okay, I'm going to really travel. Like, he thought I was traveling because I was going to Miami or something. Like, let me go to Southeast Asia for 40 days and backpack, which I've never done. No one in my family has done it. This is something I only saw on, like, watching Real World, like, on MTV, seeing them go places and stuff. That's the only thing I knew about traveling. Again, TV growing up, that was right. Like showing me another world. So, that first initial trip it was Thailand, Cambodia, and Laos. I always say it wrong. I think it's Laos or Laos, one of those. And I did that for 40 days, and it changed everything. It was hard, very difficult, a big adjustment. It wasn't just this dreamy thing.
Right. I don't speak the language.
Yeah, don't speak the language. You're dealing with social issues, not just with the people from that place, but because that wasn't really an issue. It was more like the other Americans and Europeans, like getting used to that different type of, it's a different speed than where I'm from, coming from Newark. So it was challenging, but I learned I had to find my voice again. I needed to stop caring so much about fitting in and doing the right thing to be accepted and just do me. Like, you spent all this money, you come here for your bro that's not, you're commemorating his vibe. Don't get too caught up in who likes you and if it's comfortable or not. And that decision to just do me changed my life, because once I started doing me, it actually opened up. I actually started meeting a lot of cool people. I actually started getting more vulnerable conversations and moments, friends to this day I have from those trips. And so, yeah, I think in terms of the moment of the shifts, there was a lot in that pocket of like about between 8 to 10 years ago. That was like a very transformative time period for me, with a lot of different emotions and just kind of going into the unknown, which is a big reason why I'm sure we'll talk about it. But with Black Astronaut, there's the concept of that title is about going into your unknown, which is what I think we all can connect with that in some ways. But I know for me personally, it's always felt like that, because I just feel like I never really fit into a lot of things that people told me I should do or it should work. It just never would,
Yeah, I mean, what I just took away from all what you just said is the importance of stop worrying about what other people think about you, stop worrying about whether or not you fit in or not, but just focusing on what you like, what connects with you, what are the things that you're drawn to, and if you focus on that, all the other stuff doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah, and the thing is, as simple as it is to say that now, that is extremely hard to do. Like, the hard stuff is always so simple to say. It's like, oh, to lose 20 pounds, you just have to wake up in the morning, eat right, and work out. Like, yeah, it sounds so, but it's the hard work that's in part of it. And I think, that's something that I try to promote with my work. Well, at least, now I'm not even going to say my work, but more just as a person. Just dealing with the honesty of the process, like not lying and making it seem like it's so easy or it's just so natural. Like, it's a lot of hard work. But that's why I think you just have to find something you truly love. And even that's hard to do, because you have to to find something you love. You have to try, you have to fail, you have to go certain routes and be like, oh, this isn't it. And have the heart to be like, okay, I'm going to stop now. I'm going to restart and do a whole new thing. And people are going to look at you like you're crazy. When I was traveling, like I'm talking about travel, and I did my first book was A Quest Supreme, which was based on that. It started with that trip and it ended up being over 40 countries in 5 years. And
wow.
Yeah, over those 40 countries, it kind of was like, no one thought I was doing the right thing. Like my own mom was like, where are you going now? I used to have to lie to her. I would be in Egypt and she would call me and I would be like, yeah, I'm in Miami. Like, because if I told her, she would go, oh my God, where are you going now? Oh my God. And I would just be like, I don't know where I'm going, but I know that there's something for me if I keep doing this. It's something happening. I feel alive. I'm trusting myself. I kept trusting everybody else and it didn't work, so I'm finally just going to accept me for me and deal with you kind of have to shut out that noise. There's so many people trying to tell us what to do. And I think it's out of love or hoping that you're okay, but that doesn't mean that's your journey. Someone's love doesn't mean that they're giving you the right information. It's still your life. It's still your journey. It's still, you are here for a reason. It's up to you to figure it out, not for someone to tell you, so yeah, it's a lot. Yeah.
No, that's amazing. We could take that in like 40 directions, but maybe we could talk a little bit about what do you think has been crucial in your ability to find your voice as a photographer?
Almost not giving I don't want to curse on your show. Not giving a dang, it's like, because like, so instance, so when I got started, like most photographers, putting photos on Instagram, social media, and I had a lot of friends. I had a few friends from traveling that were like travel bloggers. They were getting paid ads and all that stuff. And I'm looking at what they're doing. And I'm like, oh, I need to do that. So in the beginning, I was trying to be like one of them, and that never worked out at all. And I would take these photos that I didn't have a feeling towards, but I was like, okay, this is what you're supposed to do when you travel. You're supposed to take this kind of photo to look like this and then do these hashtags. And you're going to become, not rich, but you're going to be able to make money off this. And it never worked out. And then I just got to a point, again, this is again with the story I told you earlier, of just like, why do I care so much about what other people think? Like, my life has always shown me that it's normally the quiet voice that's the right one. The loud one is normally the one you kind of got to ignore, normally, in terms of when it comes to crowds of people. And, I just started to do me. And it was crickets. It was like, I remember it was hard in the beginning because no one was liking it. No one was commenting. Right. I wasn't getting reposted. I'm like, what's wrong with me,
Right, show me those awesome travel photos.
Yeah, everyone wants to see the other stuff, and I wasn't, So I remember there was a conversation. Oh, I remember his name. His name was a great photographer, Dan Milnor, Milnor. He has a YouTube page, and he said something that changed everything. He was talking on some interview, and he was like, the industry of photography is completely separate from the industry of like social media photography. And it was like, they don't coexist and they have nothing to do with each other. He's like, either you want to be a social influencer and do that thing, which is fine. He's like, no judgment. Or you want to go into the industry side. It's a matter of, what do you want? And I was trying to go to the industry through social media before. So then once he kind of gave that knowledge, I was like, oh. So I further just pushed it off of social media and started going into different realms and ways of connecting with people. And that's where things really started to pick up. And it was like, oh, I'm getting real traction now. Like, and I'm really into people. I think this is one of the things about, we talked about the, me being the first street photographer. So I'm drawn to people. Like people is the thing that kind of really ignites me, like stories of that nature. So when I was actually able to connect with people with my art, it was like, oh yeah, this is doing something. And I find because of my story, and I just told you about how, finding myself, it's like, it's almost impossible to create photography of other people that's not real, because it's like, I'm only attracted to stuff that I can connect with and understand. And because I've seen a lot in my life, it's like, I know the layers to it, like I know, like when I did the protest in, after George Floyd and all that went down, and you're taking those photos and you see a lot of the photography was very similar, with just like a lot of rage, a lot of throwing stuff and fire and fists up and all that stuff.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with that. I have a lot of those photos, but I knew there's more to this story. You have to look to find the voice behind the rage, stay longer, or show up earlier. Like I knew, and you got to like pay attention and like find these things, and that's finding your voice, because it's like what to look for, and then when you find it, it's like, that's me, that's the lane I go, so those are some of the things that have helped me find my voice, just being honest with my own process, who I am, and not being afraid to like find that in other people, like with no judgment. Also, that's a big part.
Yeah, it's interesting as you were talking about, you have to do it like this because that's what you're supposed to do. Yeah. There's a lot of that in landscape photography too, I mean, it's like everyone's like, oh, you got to do big wide angle with, get really close to the subject, and you have a bit, it's like very formulaic of what people say you have to do in landscape photography. But what I find is my favorite photographers, they're doing their own thing, and it's not any of the formulas. It's like you can tell that they're just connecting with the subject, they're connecting with the process, and they're just trying to express something through their work, and it comes through, and it doesn't look formulaic. So I have a great appreciation for photographers who are able to kind of shed kind of those, oh, I have to do it like that, and kind of explore what their own process. I think that's just leads to much more interesting photographs. Definitely.
Here and here's the interesting thing about that, because I agree with that 100%. Like that's what I'm drawn to personally, like breaking the rules. But I think sometimes and this is something I'm so thankful I did, like, because I learned without school, so I kind of picked up a bunch of photography books. I YouTubed it up, and I learned my way to where I'm at today. And I have like over 80 photography books in this place. Like that's all my storage in this cabinets are like, the kitchen cabinets have photography books in it. Like it's crazy. I don't know what I'm going to do when I start dating someone. It's going to be, but anyway, there's some photographers that I feel like, a lot of them, I feel like, especially in my age group, that are like, they don't want to learn the process, and like they just want to jump to breaking the rules. They want, they don't even want to learn the thing they have to break. They just want to go straight to, I'm there. And it's like, oh, you're missing so much of the groundwork that's been laid. But I think after you learn that, that's when you should break it, because that's you creating your voice and kind of stepping out and showing the world like, okay, this is what I got. But I think one of the mistakes that a lot of creatives in general, especially nowadays with the event of YouTube and things, because you can get all the information so quickly, it's like, but taking the time to learn the process, right? I think that's something that gets missed also. It's like both of those things are a part of art also. Yeah.
Well, what I love about, and by love I mean hate, but I love about YouTube is that, like, if you don't know the subject yourself and you're on YouTube, there's really no way for you to know whether or not that source of information is full of crap or if it's actually good information.
Oh, yeah. Isn't it funny? Like, when you're, like, learning stuff, and then once you, like, have learned it, you go back to some of the information, you got, like, oh, that's wrong.
That was not right.
That's BS. Like, there's some people that I still follow, and I'm just at a different stage of my artistry now, so I love them because they help me build my building blocks. But I look at some of the stuff they put out to this day, I'm like, oh no, but maybe that's just not for me. But it's just like, man, but we all got to start somewhere,
For sure.
So,
Well, let's talk more about your photography. What would you say is your core message with your work?
I think, man, one thing about life that I've learned is that's important to me is like to honor your existence and whatever that means to you, like that, honor, realize, not accept, but like just understanding that you are alive. That means something, whatever that means to you is up to you, but just doing something that honors that reality. So with my photography, I'm always trying to find something that kind of like ignites our curiosities, makes us wonder, makes us think about, wow, how did he find that? Like, that's not just the cookie cutter, like, oh, picture, smile face, here you go. It's like, I kind of put like I put depth I try to put a lot more depth and thoughtfulness into my photography. There's always some type of story. There's different elements working together. It's normally not very, it's rare that I just do something that's very cut and dry and simple. It's very rare. I try to get like dimensional with my photography. And the reason for that is, one, because I want to work my mind and intellectualize what I'm doing and like really push myself to grow. And I love that challenge, but I also find that I also don't want to simplify my work for people to just walk by and go, oh, okay. Like, I know I want you to sit there and be like, and I think that curiosity and seeing the world in a different way, or seeing how you can create a picture and not just take a picture, but create one, I think it creates conversation in people's minds and starts intellectualization about things. And, my hope with that is that it helps people or inspires people to stay curious, to look at the world a little differently, to remember different type of emotions that we may have blocked off, like especially with Black Astronaut. Like, I remember talking to I didn't go work with this publisher, but we were in talks about publishing the book, and they were saying, I don't know, this is we want to do something more upbeat, this is during 2020 and the pandemic, and we don't know if we want to go back there. People are going to be attracted to that story. And I'm like, yo, I respected them for saying that, but I was like, my book isn't just about sadness. It's not all about just what I'm telling my story. It's it's my story. And it's a story that I think deserves to be heard, and I chose not to go with them, and I've never been published before that. So the fact that I had someone interested, I'm like, nah, like that was crazy. I was like, what am I doing? What are you doing? This is like the thing. Every photographer wants to get published, and you got someone down and you're like saying, okay, this isn't the right fit. But I just truly believed in what I was doing. And, it's just important to me to just be true to that. Because I think, again, some of the stuff I'm saying today, I hope it connects, because it's like, you really have to, when you really are being you and putting your all into something, and you're not being apologetic about it or like lying, just being vulnerable, basically, like let it all hang, like put it out there. I think it translates differently with people. I find it creates a different conversation. And more importantly, it grows you as an artist, because you're surprising yourself. You're seeing, whoa, I did that, and I didn't take any shortcuts. I didn't do the thing that I knew the formula. I chose to go a different route, and it wasn't easy, but I'd rather go the route pave a way than just follow what's already been done. And it's kind of like redundant sometimes. Sometimes it is.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Well, we keep talking about Black Astronaut, and I think this is a good time to let's really dig into that. So I know you have this new book called Black Astronaut. Mm-hmm. What was the impetus behind the book, and kind of what is the messaging that's woven throughout?
Yeah, well, thank you. And I was living in Oakland, California when the pandemic hit, and I was extremely afraid. I'm sure a lot of us were, when COVID came, we didn't know what was going on, lockdowns and all that. And I remember, once the George Floyd murder happened, it was like I had a decision to make. It was like, yo, like this is a moment in history. I know you're afraid of the pandemic. At that point, I'm in better shape now, but at that point, I wasn't in the greatest of shape. I'm 6'4". I was a bigger guy. I just felt like I don't know if I need to be putting myself in harm's way of COVID, Gotcha. But I just knew at the same time is like this moment will never happen again. This person's life isn't here anymore. And the least you can do, since you have this camera, there's so many people that I feel like when tragedies happen, there's not much you can do. You can protest, you can send money, but in terms of being able to do something outside of those things, it can feel very like, I don't know, I can't do anything. And it sucks to be in that space. So the fact that I had that, I'm a photographer, I'm like, you actually can do something. And I just like risked it all and just went out there and I started shooting in Oakland and ended up traveling around America. And once I got over the fear of COVID and just kind of like knew I had to go all in for the story, getting on those planes, for example, when it was empty and mask and staying in hotels, which was crazy back then. That was like, they had these air purifiers and all this stuff in hotels. It was nuts. And, that book spiraled into me just wanting to follow the George Floyd situation and see the protests in different parts of the country. I think I went to 9 states and 13 cities. And even after I was in Minneapolis for the verdict, I was outside the courtroom. I knew even after that, I was like, this isn't it. It's not over. Like, it's not over. There's more happening in America that needs to be told, because I've done been so many places. I've seen there's different avenues. It's not just Black Lives Matter. There's a vaccine thing. There's a women's thing. There's a American thing. There's so many things going on. So I wanted to push myself and really explore all these avenues. And that became, and in that process, I started to think about it like, what does an astronaut do? Like, an astronaut goes into like these unfamiliar territories where everything around it could like murder them or hurt them, which is how I felt about COVID. Not the people. COVID, I felt like was like this air that was going to like destroy me if I got it in my system. So, and having the mask on, I had gloves on, I had a visor on. I was all like, I was protected to the tens, and I felt like I was an astronaut. And then one day I was like, I'm an astronaut, Black astronaut, and it was the perfect title, I feel, because it was a great way to encapsulate the story in terms of my vision of it. Because I think there's a lot of, books that might come out that's like, America in crisis, America 2020, whatever. And, you know what you're going to get. It's about what someone saw outside. This is a much more personal journey of my own, from the forward, which is like very personal, me speaking about a near-death experience and how that connects to everything that was going on in 2020. And just going into all those avenues was such a meaningful journey that will probably be like the thing that one of the things in my life anyway, that will always be true to or close to my heart, because I just seen so much and I held nothing back. And I think it shows in the book. Like the now that I'm actually getting responses from people are experiencing the book, it seems that it's doing really well and it's starting a conversation and it's inspiring people, which is the number one thing. Because that one publisher said, it's going to be dark. And I was like, no, it's going to be real. It's going to be real and people can handle truth, and
life isn't all cupcakes and ice cream.
That's what I'm saying, man. You understand. So, but yeah, it was great. And I just think the concept of being an astronaut, I think we all are put in uncomfortable situations where things don't make sense. We have to kind of create these invisible suits of armor to kind of go towards our dreams, our journeys, and do the right thing, and that's kind of what Black Astronaut is all about from my personal experience. And I lay it out in a way that it becomes about us, and where we are and how we are our own astronaut in our own right, and how we're going towards our dreams and visions or whatever we deem as right. Yeah.
So you set off to do this book during COVID.
Mm-hmm.
You got the George Floyd protests going on. It sounds like you kind of had some ideas of where you wanted the book to go or what you wanted the photographs to do.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm guessing, though, that throughout that process, there were some unexpected things that happened, or maybe you learned something about yourself or about America or about the situation you found yourself in.
Mm-hmm.
What surprised you the most through the process of creating the work?
Honestly, okay, we're going to be honest here, right? We're going to be honest.
Yeah.
The surprise, if you're using the word surprise, I would think the surprise was, and I think it's the thing that motivated me to take pictures of more than just Black Lives Matter and George Floyd, and I wanted to see more avenues because I found that the rage that was going on in America, that kind of still is going on, I realized that it has different shapes and sizes, so to speak, like it's different groups, but it's the same core message of like, I'm trying to do what I think is right. And although I have my perspective of what I think is right and what makes sense to me, who am I to tell anyone else that I'm more right? Or, I'm always trying to work from a space of non-judgment. Because everyone deserves a voice. I know I don't want to be judged, so I try to give that same courtesy to others. And I think that was the biggest surprise, because outside looking in, say me at a when I was going to the anti-vax rallies, if I would have went to that maybe before, if you would have just told me I was going to go to that, I would have a certain ideology about what I think I would expect, how it would feel. If I would enjoy it, it would make sense. And to my surprise, there was a lot that made sense. There were things that I didn't agree with for sure. But when I was really listening and like talking to people, I'm like, this is very normal. It's not as out of control as you would CNN or different places were saying, and I think that's the good umbrella for all of it. The surprises. The surprise was, when you go into these places for yourself and you put down the phone, you put down seeing the TV, and you actually explore these things, you find out that the story is actually a lot different from what we're being told. I think that was the biggest surprise, because, again, there were things I disagree with for sure, but there was a lot that I was like, wait a minute, they didn't talk about that. Even when it comes to the protest, you would think that everyone was getting shot and there was fire everywhere. And it was like, no, that wasn't what was happening. There was a lot of peace. And then you would find, some things happen in certain places late at night. But in general, it was very peaceful. And, so, yeah, you got to find out for yourself. That's the thing, I think. And, of course, now with algorithms and, it's a lot harder for people to, I think people are relying more and more on the phone to tell them what reality is, and that's the unfortunate part of this whole thing. Like,
yeah, I mean, it's sad that news outlets, they're driven by commercial profit, and so they're going to do whatever it takes to get more eyeballs, which means they're designing content that's designed to emotionally hijack us,
right?
And that's going to lead to emotion. Right. And that's not always the best thing to lead with.
I'm telling you. I'm 37. Yeah, I'm 30. I forget my age. It's weird now. I think I just don't want to know anymore. Like, I'm 37. And, I can remember a little bit more when phones weren't what it was today. And I just look at how the social landscape has changed. Like how the conversations, I can be in any part of the country and it's the same conversations. It's like, it used to be more individuality, a lot more of a dynamic intellectual landscape, I would say. And now it seems like things have been so condensed and they're kind of rooted in, opposition. And it's kind of like, wow, like I don't know how this continues.
Right.
Because then again, when you get into the real world and you kind of get out of that space, there's so much more to experience in these things, is what I'm trying to say. Like, so, it's interesting, and maybe that's an interesting topic for someone to take pictures of one day. I don't know. But, like, it seems like there's a story there in terms of where we're going as a society,
For sure.
Yeah.
All right. So we mentioned before that you're, like, the first street photographer on the podcast. What, in your mind, makes for a compelling street image?
Oh man, good question. I like that one. I just think it has to garnish some type of emotion. I think it has to make you invoke something out of you. Like it can't just be so robotic, where it's like, oh, the lighting, the way the shape. Some people are really into that. I'm Like, well, if I didn't feel anything, I mean, you're technically amazing. Don't get it. You're a scientist when it comes to this stuff, whoever that is that does that type of photo. But for me, you know, I'm looking for, it can be a photo when someone is less finesse and they just kind of get an emotion that's just raw and real. And I'll look at that for 10, 20 minutes. Like, wow, how did you, that's real life. I'm looking for real life when I'm seeing photography. So it's hard to get that with a camera. That's the challenge, I think. So I think that's what makes a good photo, when you can kind of find that thing that really evokes emotion and you are kind of like disciplined and dedicated enough to actually get that, because it's not easy. You can't just go out there and go, click, got it, ready to go. Like, you got to put in time, hours, days. Like, it's a workout. That's one of the things that was also a big surprise with me with photography, was just how much of a physical sport it is. Like, I didn't know once I got like a professional, like a pro and all that stuff, like, and I see how much work you really have to do this stuff. Like, your body is, you need to be together. Like, it's not a game. Like, you will not get that shot. You will be ready to go home, and you got to have the stamina, endurance. It's a lot. So yeah, emotions is a big thing. Like, you gotta bring some vibes, and on top of that, and if you can have some finesse too, like, oh, you didn't just take a picture of somebody and say click. You actually showed me that you were working like 3-dimensional or something like that. Like, you got the background working with this, and there's a conversation between that. If you can do that, you got my vote. You got my vote.
It's interesting. It's interesting because I was talking to a friend of mine about this the other day, about street photography and landscape photography, and he had made a comment that I totally agreed with, but I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on it, because we were both looking at a book that just got put out by a landscape photographer that's all street images. Like, he's like trying on street photography for the first time.
Oh wow.
And it was really interesting because in landscape photography there's so much of an emphasis on composition and, you know, lines and shapes and textures. Whereas in street photography, I feel like, yeah, lines and shapes and textures, those are nice. But, like, really what's more important in street, like, it's not so much composition. It's like, you have to have a story. You have to have an emotional impact. All that other stuff is, like, nice to have. But if you don't have the other things, it's not a good street image.
Right.
And so I'm just curious, like, what are your thoughts on that differentiation?
Yeah, I agree. And when it comes to landscape photography, I extremely respect it, because I've tried it before and I know how hard it is. I was like, whoa, this is okay. Like, because I'm looking at what the good stuff looks like, and I'm like, how did they do that? You know, like, so I respect it tremendously. And I also agree. I think there's different mediums require different types of, like, thought processes, and you're looking for certain things. And it definitely is good to have a little bit of other mediums to bring into the place, because if you're doing landscape and you can go into street, I'm sure you're going to have an upper hand with knowing composition, because you're more into that, I would think, in terms of lands. And
I would think vice versa as well.
Yeah,
like, if you're...
you would probably, I would, like, because I would be looking for, like, how do I get emotion out of this? That's the first thing I would be thinking about. Then I would go into, like, okay, let's get the lines together and stuff like that. But I totally agree. I think it's very interesting that they did that, because it's a very, you know, there's also a patience thing that happens, I think, with landscape photography. I might be wrong, but I feel like it's a more like, you know, you're taking your time, you're setting up, you're trying to find things. I don't know. But I know with street, for me, it's kind of like you got to be on the move. You know, it's kind of like, because when it comes, it comes. Like, it comes, it comes. You miss it, you missed it. It ain't coming back. You can't tell them, hey, could you walk back over here and do that thing?
Yeah, no, I feel like street and wildlife are kind of similar, because although in a lot of wildlife, there's a lot of waiting and stuff like that too. But to your point, like, you're more focused on, like, capturing the right moments, whereas in landscape, moment's important, but it's much more about form and composition and like, how do you weave those into creating that story and that emotional impact? It's like, it's not always there for the taking. Like, you have to build it.
Definitely.
Whereas street photography is like, it's there if you're paying attention, but it's also gone a second later.
Going a second later, you have to be very quick with it. I'm not like,
Yeah.
and it depends on your skill set too. It depends on your skill set and what you're trying to do. But I also know, like when I was coming up, a lot of the photographers would say something. I still don't do this to this day. I don't do this advice. And the advice is you find a spot that has the composition already and you wait for someone to come. I work exact opposite because to me, again, if I don't see anybody interesting, I mean, you can find somebody walking by. But they're just walking by.
Like, I feel like that'd be so boring.
Yeah. Thank you. You said. I was like, because I tried. I'm like, this doesn't. I feel like I'm just sitting down. That's not the point. The point is to, and I think that's the other fear is like you have to. Which I was thinking about this before we did this podcast. I'm no one to say what this is or not. I just know that I don't label things as introvert, extrovert. I think there's fluidity in it, but sure. I do know that, some people get a rise out of people and some people get a rise out of nature. I do know that is one of the things that normally is a thing. And I wonder how much that is connected to, which if you choose to go more into street photography, documentary style, or if you go into nature, landscape. I'm just curious. I don't have an answer for that, but
Oh no, it's for sure a big thing. I mean, 90% of landscape photographers are introverted. I would say I'm one of the few rare weirdos that's like extroverted, but I also like to be by myself too. So I'm kind of like you said, I'm very fluid in it, but I'm surprised in myself that I haven't gotten more into street photography. But to be fair, I've never really spent a ton of time in places where I feel like interesting street photography would occur.
That's another part. So that was what I was going to say.
It's like landscapes. You got to put yourself in the places where those opportunities are going to be coming at you.
Exactly, because I'm not going to say what part of Texas I was in, but that part had no street photography vibes. I don't want to talk bad about anybody. I'm just going to say the part of Texas I was in, it wasn't the jam. I was like, man, I miss New York. I could just go outside and just find something interesting. So, that is very true. Sometimes your location and the other part is getting over the hump as it relates to introvert, extrovert is like getting over the hump of being able to talk to people and like actually be like, walking up and saying, hey man, I take your photo, or dealing with someone saying, hey, did you, just there's a lot of social parts that go into it that you have to like learn to get comfortable with, especially when you're starting out. But, I think once you work it, you kind of get to that point of like, it just becomes second nature. Like, yeah.
So this kind of relates to something we were talking about earlier. But when I was going through your website, there was one image in particular that really stood out to me. It just connected for me a lot and on so many levels. But basically, it's an image of a girl. I think she's a white woman. Mm-hmm. She's kind of looking at her cell phone down like this, like oblivious to the world around her, right? Mm-hmm. Obviously, she has financial means. Mm-hmm. And then in front of her is a mirror that's reflecting an image of a homeless man. And it's so like that stark contrast between like this guy and her, they were so different, and she's ignoring what's right in front of her. It was just, to me, like it said, there's a lot of messages like in one image. So tell me the story behind that image and kind of what drew you to capture it.
So yeah, the New York photo, that's the New York photo. I always call it the New York photo because that was like my first photo ever taken. So that was like, oh, you did art for the first time. So I remember I was in New York. I was just doing street photography that day, just like, exploring, and I ran into that guy that's in the photo that's sitting there with that mirror, and I'm just like, what is this gold? Like, I don't understand. Like, is this like, what is happening right now? And I took a few photos of him, but I didn't want to be too, intrusive, and I wanted to be respectful. So I didn't like stay over there too long, but I was just kind of like, it was just such an interesting thing to even look at, not even just take pictures of, but just seeing that mirror with him there. And then, for a quick moment, I did notice the lady that had the Louis Vuitton purse, and I just like took it, not really thinking much of it in the moment until like I came home and I looked at it and I was like, because at that point that was like one of my first photography photos, so it was like I didn't even know what I was looking at, because I was like, wait, this is different, but I don't know.
Something's
do
different.
People see what I see.
I'm
I
not
don't
sure what
I don't know. Yeah. And then when I put it out, people were like, yo, that was like the first time people, like, they finally did give me some response for something I put online. And it went, it's a really important photo because, again, that was me kind of stretching my, my wings, so to speak, of just like, trying to see how you can create conversation and dialogue with a photo, not just taking photos. I forget what photographer said that. I think it's Joel Meyerowitz. I think he said this. He says, you can either take a photo or you can make a photo. Like, you can create one. He's like, I'm more into creating photography, not just taking a photo. So I think that was me, like, kind of taking that information and really, like, expanding myself. And around that time was the time I started buying books from photographers and finding out about the people before me that was doing this way back in the day, that like that were doing stuff to this day. If you see it, you go like, how did they do that?
Right.
And that kind of really inspired me, because like that's kind of where I try to be truthful to myself, but at the same time I do want to, like, that's like the goal. Like, I want to make something where like people are like, yo, how did you get that close? How did you, so that photo has a special place in my heart, because that's like kind of the first time I was able to actually do it, and it took a few years, probably 4 years to get to that point. I think 4 or 5 years to get to that point. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, how do you stand out as a photographer in such a crowded space? I mean, everyone's got an iPhone.
So I have this photo in Black Astronaut. It's one of my favorites. It's of my friend. I nicknamed her Punk Mega. She's so shy, but like her name fits her perfectly. But we did this photo where I kind of, cause like in my photography, I do street photography, but I'll also do like a more of a photo shoot kind of vibe, where like I'm actually like saying something very like particular throughout the book also, for narrative. And we did this photo where the background, she's wearing an astronaut suit, and the background says, "Don't be a slave to the algorithm." And that photo means a lot to me, but to my surprise, that's also translated very well with people. That's one of the photos everyone seems to speak on, talk about, bring up. It was actually in an art show about a month ago, and it sold like quickly. I was like, oh wow, I didn't, that was a surprise.
Right.
So yeah, so don't be a slave to the algorithm. So that goes into, your question. And I think the way you do it is you choose to not be afraid to stand on your own and make your own way. Whatever that means to you, though, because I have my way, but that doesn't mean that will work for you. But I do know that we're individuals at the end of the day. And although like these rules, like we were talking about breaking the rules do matter. They have a place, and they're definitely good guidelines. But at the end of the day, you have to kind of create your own path, and I think that's right. The part, and that goes into what we said earlier about like, it's easy to say like, just work hard, or right. Just find your voice, or just be on. Like, these things are very hard to do, so it takes time and lots of failure. But I think today's world seems to be we're not experiencing life the way I think we are designed to. I think our curiosities are not getting fed the way they really need to be. And it takes, waking up to that fact and like doing something about it, finding hobbies, finding ways to get out the house, finding ways to get outside of your normal day to day, or even if it's like once every month or whatever you got to do to like kind of find that balance. I think that's something that's important too, because if you're not exploring or living yourself, like you're not, and you're an artist, how are you going to stand out if you're not even doing anything different than anybody else? Like you're doing the same old two-step that everyone's doing, or maybe let me rephrase that. You're doing your same old two-step. You're doing what your normal is. And if you're an artist, you're always trying to create new things. You're trying to, go beyond your limits. I would think you are anyway. And to do that, it requires you to be an example of that. So I think, you just choosing to just be honest with yourself and push yourself and really ask yourself, what do I want? What moves me? What's something bigger than me that scares the hell out of me? Like, what's something that's really going to put me in this position where, like, how am I going to do that? You know, and like, write it down, put it on a piece of paper, put it on a vision board, put it on your refrigerator, notes, whatever you got to do. Like, just like make it a real thing and hold yourself accountable. And I just truly believe this because it's been my experience. It's like, I think we don't give ourselves enough credit for what we're capable of. You know, and we kind of like think like the worst is going to happen. No one's going to pay attention. Why me? And it's like, why not you? Like, you know what I mean? People talk themselves out of doing things. Like, right. You know what I mean? You just showing up is already putting you up there, believe it or not. You know, so if you just show up and then actually like go hard at it and figure out whatever that means to you, I think the world opens up for you like one way or another. It might not go the way you want it to go, but you will find your path. Like, that's been my journey, you know, just continuously staying steadfast and finding things that I care about. Because the thing is, when you don't care about it, you're not moved, you know, and you're just doing it because you're supposed to do it. And then you're not going to make anything that I think is going to be special to you because you're not caring about it. And you're wanting other people to see you as somebody. And it's like, you don't even care about it that much. You know, you care more about telling people you're a photographer. You care more about looking like a photographer versus just being what you are. These are things I had to learn. So this is like, I'm not pointing any fingers. I had to learn the difference between doing the work versus seeming like you are doing the work. And they don't, you know, they're two different things. You know, one's an image, one's you're doing it. And you might have to be solo for a while. You know, you might have to be in your dark room, but that's the process. You know, so
it's so interesting.
That's my take on that.
To hear a street photographer say these words, because I hope a lot of landscape photographers are hearing what you have to say, because there's a lot of what you just described in the landscape photography space where people are kind of doing, you know, what they think they're supposed to be doing, and they're kind of copying what other people are doing, and hopefully they'll get noticed. But it's like, if you really want to be noticed, you kind of got to do something that's a little bit different, that's you, right? And I'm not going to be able to tell you what that is. Only you can do that. Right. But, you know, if it's you, it's going to come out. If it's other people's stuff, it's going to show.
Right. And it's going to be real weird when people ask you a bunch of questions and you don't have no answers. Like, it's like, that was the one thing, like when I was having meetings, even today, like if I have like somebody trying to do some type of contract or something, like I remember how uncomfortable I would feel in college, for example. Like when I didn't understand the subject matter, I'm just like, when you put me on a spot, I'm just like, you know, even certain parts of real estate, I wasn't comfortable with it. And it was just so uncomfortable. Whereas because I know this is who I am, this is what I care about, this is me being honest about me, there's nothing you can ask me that's going to make me uncomfortable. There's no room I can go into and sit there and be like, oh no, and shrink. It's like, no, this is you. This is authentically you. This is your time. You worked for this. You did the steps. This is the easy part. The hard part is that building block.
Right.
This should be the easy part. And I think people, you know, sometimes don't understand that, maybe because they're not finding that out. Maybe because they think it's a quotation and not learning the work of it all. I don't know. But I had to I'm thankful that I've had other photographers and individuals in my life and podcasts and just people I look up to that have kind of were honest about the process. And I'm like, okay, so it is possible. You just have to be willing to apply yourself and just be unapologetic. I don't like that word right for this. It's not unapologetic. It's just more like, just stop caring so much and just go for what you want to. Stop thinking about the result and just do what you like.
Absolutely.
Like, just do that and see what comes. You'll be surprised.
I agree.
I'm sure we all can relate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. I got a couple more questions for you, Kamal. I noticed that you have a podcast of your own called A Quest Supreme. You haven't updated it in a while. I was curious what the goal for the show was and if you have any plans to resurrect it.
Yeah, so what happened that was birthed in the pandemic when I dropped my when I put out A Quest Supreme, which is my first photography book with the traveling across the world, finding peace with my lost friend. That's kind of the whole, that's what that book is. And I did that podcast to like kind of like be a part of that, like they're like a correlated kind of thing, you know. And once, you know, things got picked up or started picking up with me with taking photography for 2020 and on, you know, I just didn't have the time. I was also on the road a lot. It just kind of like veered away. And I think the process, no, I don't think I know. Like I always knew that Quest Supreme was going to be more about the book and not an ongoing forever show. So the good news is that with Black Astronaut out, I'm revamping a new podcast for Black Astronaut. It's going to be called Black Astronaut Radio. I probably shouldn't have said that. Anyway, you know, I can. You're the first to find out.
All right.
Black Astronaut Radio, which will be starting really soon, and this will actually be video, along with the audio. That I'm, you know, now that I finally got a home, you know, this has been a part of the process
right?
too, having my own space, so I can like record again, because I'm really, really excited to talk more about, you know, what Black Astronaut means to me and how I think it connects to all of us in different ways, and have interesting conversations as to what it means to be, you know, going into your unknown, whatever that looks like. I think there's a lot of interesting dialogue that can go into that space. So that's what's coming next. So I think that's just going to be my thing. Whenever I put like a project out, I think I'm going to do like a 10 to 12 episode series on that.
That's a good idea.
Call it, and then I can get back to, because I know my personality. I can't keep it rolling.
Gotcha.
It's just not the way I'm set up. So 12 and out, you know, that's kind of, so yeah, I'm gearing up for the new podcast, and I can't wait to share that. And I'm sure you'll have like links for people to connect with me and all that stuff, so they'll know how to check me out and be a part of the vibe.
Well, and now that you've said it, you have to do it.
Oh yeah, oh, it's happening. Oh, trust me, man, it's such a thing. Like I got the video stuff, I got the lighting. I'm saving up to get a third camera actually, because I'm really trying to push the production. I'm going into, I think the next thing for me, I have a new project that I am working on now, but I think I know I'm going to be doing a short film. I want to get into film. So I'm transitioning into a new space, you know, and so this is actually kind of like coupled with it a little bit, just taking video more seriously. So this is like, you know, really pushing it and seeing what I can do for a little bit of training wheels action before we get into the real. I was gonna say that's a huge learning curve right there. Oh, it's gonna be, you know, but my first love was movies, you know. Totally. So a lot of times I wonder, like, you know, I feel like this is just a natural progression. Like it just seems like sort of like in my books, like I love street photography, documentary style, but I'll always do like these, like my photo shoots within them. I always have this narrative, and I really enjoy narrative and actually just saying exactly what I want you to, you know, I want to tell a story the way I want to tell it also. So I think that in getting into film, that will kind of give me that, you know, the writing aspect of it, the storytelling aspect. I think it will really be kind of cool. So that's like my new goal for the next year, like short film within a year. We're going to see how that goes. I love it. Yeah.
All right. One more question. Who do you recommend our listeners learn more about? Who's someone that we should have on the show?
Ooh, on the show that's like alive. Okay. I'm thinking, because when I first hear that, I'm thinking of like all the OGs that may not be here anymore that I like look up to. Someone. Oh man, there's a few good ones.
You had sent me Luisana Tejada.
Yeah, Luisana, she's really cool. Luisana is the homie. She's from Brooklyn. She was a photographer before when I first kind of got into it. We were in this part of this photography group chat, and she was a great help with like helping me with like doing photo shoots in the beginning, because I didn't have anybody to do photo shoots. She's like a professional. I remember the second time I met her, she actually had a show. Like she had like her stuff up, and I was like, whoa, like, okay. One day, you know, like I'm like, what would it be like to have a show? You know, like, so we're really good friends. She's an amazing photographer. She seems to I don't want to explain her, but she definitely gets into yoga. She's into yoga now, so a lot of her photography is geared towards that. And there's another photographer that I'm thinking about that is a great inspiration to me, that I really like him. He's in Brooklyn too. I really hope to meet him. I feel like I will. His name's Andre Wagner. I really appreciate his work. I think we're like kind of the same age. He does his own, like, we're not the same photographer at all, but like he definitely does black and white. He does film. And whenever I see the stuff that he's doing, it's always a great inspiration. So I would definitely, suggest people check his stuff out too. I got to see his work. He just had a exhibit at the Gordon Parks Foundation Gallery in like upstate New York. I feel like that's where that was. It was like an hour drive from Brooklyn. I know that, and it's going north. So I don't know what part that's called, but it was there. It was nice. It was cool. It was great. And he's a really good documentary style photographer. I think that everyone should, get to know. He's a great person to check out.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Kamal, this has been super fun. I love learning about your journey, about the book. Where can people learn more about you, the book, and your photography?
Yeah, the best place, my website is www.iamkamalx.com, spelled, I am and KAMAL X.com. My Instagram is a great way to connect with me too. I am Kamal X is my Instagram. Keep it pretty simple. Yeah. Keep it real simple. If you go to my website, you can send me an email. If you go to my Instagram, you can DM me. I'm all about the community and working together and connecting, because it really does take a village. I know me starting out with photography, a lot of it was sending messages to other photographers, asking questions, getting information. And the people that were nice enough to give me feedback and help, man, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for that. So I'm definitely a big advocate for connecting with other photographers and creatives and just being supportive and just being open and honest. And for my book, Black Astronaut, it's currently available on several platforms, but Amazon is like the easiest. Everyone has Amazon. If you go to Amazon, just type in Black Astronaut, Kamal X, it pops up. My book has it's a big yellow X, and I'm on the front, so you can't miss it. I designed it that way purposely. But it's a cool book, and I really, any support really means the world. Like, it's been a hell of a journey to get to this point. I'm so thankful. I just found out the book is actually in the bookstore at the Smithsonian in DC.
Oh, cool.
Which is crazy.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That kind of blew my mind.
Yeah.
And thank you. And they're saying it's selling well too. I'm like, what? I'm like losing my mind. So I'm just so thankful for all of this and connecting with you, being here. Amazing conversation, very thought-provoking too. And just the different mediums and awesome questioning. And yeah, man, I'm just here. And I hope to continue to stay connected with you. And this was a great, great, great moment. And I'm just happy to share it with you.
Well, thank you to Kamal for the great conversation on the podcast this week. I encourage everyone to support Kamal by buying a copy of his book, Black Astronaut, which you can find a link to in the show notes. We have a lot of great guests coming up, including Tony Sweet, Mark Davis, Mike DeMiola, and Tim Jeffrion. Thank you all for your ongoing support of the show on Patreon. I can't thank you enough. Cheers. That's all for now. Thanks for stopping in, collaborating with us, and listening. See you next week.